and Artistic Director of the Atlantic Theater Company, Neil Pepe. Neil has come all the way from Manhattan to come up here, and I'm going to embarrass him right now by reading his bio. So bear with me. Neil Pepe has innumerable credits and accomplishments in the theater, from leading one of the most respected, vibrant stage companies in the country to nurturing and directing many of the extraordinary key plays in the modern American canon. He's been the artistic director of the Atlantic Theater Company since 1992, and in 2009 was recognized by his peers with a Drama Desk Special Award for Artistic Excellence. In 2022, he received a Tony nomination for Best Director for the Broadway revival of American Buffalo with Sam Rockwell, Lawrence Fishburne, and Darren Criss. His extensive list of Broadway credits include, among other countless titles, Hands on Hardbody, Speed the Plow, Life in the Theater. At the Atlantic Theater Company, he's directed Simon Stevens' On the Shore of the Wide World, Cornelia Street, David Mamet's The Penitent, and Romance, which I was in. Kenneth Lonergan's Hold On to Me, Darling, Moira Buffini's Dying for It, John Guare's Three Kinds of Exiles, Ethan Cohen's Almost an Evening, Harold Pinter's Celebration and The Room, Sam Shepard's Evanescence or Shakespeare in the Alley, Hilary Bell's Wolf Lullaby. These were all premieres, by the way, I believe. Off-Broadway and elsewhere, he's directed such plays as Eric Bogosian's Red Angel at Williamstown, Zinnie Harris's Further Than Furthest Thing at MTC, Jez Butterworth's Parlor Song and Mojo, and also Jez Butterworth's The Night Heron at Atlantic, which he directed me in. Jessica Goldberg's Refuge at Playwrights Horizons. He's married to Atlantic Theater Company Acting School Executive Director Mary McCann, whom I performed with in Oleana for a really, really long, long time. And a wonderful time. They have two daughters, Juliet and Lena Pepe. And Lena, who is an aspiring actress, and she's here tonight to learn some pointers from Dad. She's just starting out after graduating from Vassar and was just in the hit play Cornelia Street at the Atlantic, so another thespian making her debuts. So tell me, Neil, how and why was the Atlantic Theater Company founded?
As you know, I'm going to sit forward.
Yes, don't do it.
I'll try to talk loudly. So the Atlantic Theater Company is sort of how Jim and I met. There was a group of students, of which I was not one, who studied with the actor William H. Macy and the playwright David Mamet at New York University from 1983 to 85. And Mamet had studied in the 60s with Sanford Meisner and was a big sort of fan of that technique. And then I think as he and Macy had created a theater company in Chicago called the St. Nicholas Theater Company, they developed a technique which I sort of would describe as a little bit of a reaction to the method. It was a very action-based technique, certainly coming out of the Meisner stuff. Mamet was really into Aristotle and the Stoic philosophers. And so they ran this workshop at NYU from 1983 to 85, and they had this group of students that they not only took up to Vermont, where Macy and Mamet undergraduate program students. Yep. And then they took this same group of students out to the Goodman Theater in Chicago, in, I think 1985. And then at the end of their time, they said, we don't feel like we have anything left to teach you. Go out, we've coined this name, the Atlantic. Go out and create your own work. And they also handed over the school to sort of continue teaching this technique, which is outlined. One summer, Mamet said, who's feeling summary? And a couple of people raised their hands, and then he said, great, summarize the technique, and we'll publish it in a book, which they did, and that became a practical handbook for the actor, which we use and is sort of outlines that technique. So that's how it started, a group of kind of very hungry young actors who wanted to create their own work, didn't want to sort of wait around for casting directors. And I knew Clark Gregg and I had parked cars together at a restaurant. And I knew Felicity Huffman and I had gone to high school together, so I knew some of the founding members. And I became an intern there, a tech director, and also studied with them in the summer of 1987, where I met my now wife, Mary McCann, Lena's mother, and kind of got more and more involved with the company, and we started growing. We had our first show in 1988, our first sort of equity professional show, get picked up by Lincoln Center, and that was called Boys Life.
Right.
And that kind of set us off and going.
And at that point, you'd all come up, most of you had come up undergrad, NYU, you'd taken Mamet and Macy had kind of taken you under their wing, and you became this force. And I remember you said 1988, where I met Neil, if I can just backtrack a little bit. 1988, I was doing a play in Boston. It wasn't a play, it was a one-night benefit for a group of homeless Vietnam veterans. It was run by the Veterans Workshop. And we had all these stars who Mamet had lined up to come to the Colonial Theater for this one night. They were actors like
Pacino,
Al Pacino, Chris Walken, Macy. Donald Sutherland did a performance of Johnny Got His Gun, which was an anti-war anthem that he and Jane Fonda used to go around and do. And then, it was Michael J. Fox came, Bob Prosky, Don Amici, the folk singers Tom Paxton and Bob Gibson, and then to cap it all off, 40 members of the New York City Police Department's Emerald Society with their bagpipes all came up to Boston to perform in this one night only show to benefit Vietnam. I think they were drunk the whole time. These guys were they were bombed the whole time with their bagpipes, but it was an amazing show.
Yeah.
So David Mamet said to me, because you can imagine the logistics of having to do the transportation, the lodging, all of the things that had to be done, and Mamet said to me, call the Atlantic Theater Company, who had just been formed.
Yeah.
And he had up to me, he said, they're like the Marines. They will come to Boston and take over and do all of that stuff. And I was amazed, and they did. They came in your early to mid-20s, you were 23, 24, 25, highly organized, highly talented, and which is, in your early 20s, organized is something that is a stretch, can be a stretch. But they came up. The thing that impressed me the most about this young group of talented people was their dedication to each other and to the theater. They were wonderful. They loved each other. They had formed a bond. It was really something to watch.
And we had, it was great mentors for me, because I had gone to a place called Kenyon College in Ohio, and then I got involved with these guys, and I was an apprentice at Actors Theater Blue.
Right.
So when I got involved, the thing that struck me about the company is that it was, like you said, it was the hardest working group of people that I'd ever worked with, and so that was incredible. Yeah, we just did live shows. You want me to pat on the back?
Give me a pat on the back. Yeah, there we go. That got it. So, I want to tell you a little bit about, if I can, the Atlantic Theater Company.
I'll fill in.
Yeah, fill in. I choked to death.
I'll give you the high.
So, since its inception in 1986, was it 86?
Well, actually, 85 is when it actually started. The school started, and then the theater company. So right around there, yeah.
Right.
Coming up on our 40.
The Atlantic Theater Company has produced more than 200 plays, including Tony Award-winning productions of Kimberly Akimbo, The Band's Visit, Spring Awakening, and Beauty Queen of Lenan. These plays all started at Atlantic and moved
To Broadway. Yep.
And I'm going to talk to you about that process,
Yep.
how that happens,
Yeah.
as we get on here a little bit. But Pulitzer Prize recipients, the play English and Between Riverside and Crazy, The Night Alive, which was a New York Drama Critics Circle winner for Best New Play, and Hangman, Martin McDonough's Hangman, Best Foreign Play, and Describe the Night, which was an Obie Award winner for Best New American Play. And the company,
Rajiv Joseph.
with Rajiv Joseph, of course. And the company has won 27 Tonys, 28 Obie Awards, 2 Pulitzers, and an extensive list of other awards, too numerous to mention or embarrass me. Amazing the work that you have done, and you've been the artistic director since 1992.
Yeah, didn't expect it.
So you had all of these great, NYU actors under the tutelage of David Mamet and William H. Macy.
Yeah.
Explain to me what the practical aesthetic, what is the concept of acting,
the philosophy.
of the philosophy of
Yeah.
acting?
I think two main things, which is, it wasn't sort of lost on us that we were founded by a playwright. So the whole technique of practical aesthetics is about serving the story of the play. Basically the idea that all elements of the theater, whether it's the actors, the directors, the designers, the marketers, the front of house, the development people, that we're all there to serve the story. And we took that very seriously. So it wasn't necessarily an actor's theater, it wasn't necessarily a director's theater. We really were about how do we best serve the story. So that was one big principle. The other big principle was about action. The analysis and the technique, practical aesthetics, is so much about objectives and actions as opposed to emotion. We thought of emotion as being a byproduct of action. So, a lot of our approach to how we distilled our mission down to producing great plays simply and truthfully utilizing an artistic ensemble, which sounds really basic, but it was a distillation of how we defined great plays, and that was sort of first and foremost the truth of the voice of the writer, the writer's ability to handle plot, story, how they handle character and dialogue, and do they write for the theater? Do they have language for the theater as opposed to film or TV? And then simplicity and truth were big kind of principles and staples of not only how we wanted the work to be approached, but also how we wanted the culture of the company to be. It was really about transparency, striving for excellence, sort of challenging everybody to do their best work, but also having fun, as you know, and telling the truth, trying to be honest and not sort of divisive and gossipy, but really saying, look, we're here to do great plays, and let's do them as well as we can, and let's have humility and respect for each other, and let's try to have a good time, because none of us really got into it to make money. We just wanted to do great plays. And I think part of the longevity was we just let the work speak first. It was just like, if you want to know whether you like us, come and see the plays. And if you like the plays, great. If you don't like the plays, that's okay too. So it was really leading with the work.
Yeah. Now, you had in that original company, these are all, I think all of these people are still Atlantic Company members. I'm talking to people like Clark Gregg, who you've seen on television in the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., and also Kristen Johnston, who was on Third Rock from the Sun, Felicity Huffman, our friend Felicity Huffman, who's married to William H. Macy. We were all at their wedding up in Colorado many years ago. It was on,
Desperate
Housewives.
Yeah.
Scott Ziegler, the artistic director of the theater before you started in 1992, went on to run the UNC School for the Arts in Chapel Hill.
Yeah, he's the Dean, North Carolina School of the Arts, and then he was ran the ART.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And there are many other notable people as part of this company, and it's been fascinating to watch and work with all these wonderful actors and see their own careers kind of move on. How do you navigate all of that when you're casting a play? Who are you? Because you've got a lot of people in your company. How do you navigate all of that when you're casting?
Well, it sort of evolved. we were big, we were very influenced. There's a great book that Harold Klerman wrote called The Fervent Years, about the group theater in the 1930s. And we were really into that book because it was all about how the group theater started. And there's a quote in there from him where he says, most theater ensembles have a shelf life of 7 to 10 years, where they sort of get together, they sort of bond, whether they have a technique or not, they start doing plays, some of them get famous, some of them get married, some of them do this or that, and then it kind of peaks, and some people might move to LA or do whatever, and then around 7 or 10 years it probably either splits up or evolves into a new phase. So the reason I say that is, when we started out in our 20s, it was all about putting ourselves to work. So it was all about the actors. And we would choose, initially it was easy, as this is like Steppenwolf. If you look at early, the theater company from Chicago, a lot of their early plays were revivals, because it's much easier to cast yourself in a play when the playwright's no longer living. So when the playwright's living and you're doing premieres in New York, the playwrights have lots to say about how they want the play cast. So the reason I say it is, for the first 7 to 10 years, it was all about trying to put the ensemble to work, which we did a pretty good job, which navigating is tricky, in terms of trying to figure out what the parameters were, what you would say to writers, and where you would give or take. Then, after 10 years, some people moved to LA, some people got more famous than others, and there was a group of us that decided we're going to stay in New York and we're going to keep trying to build this theater. We're not going to leave and go off. But we sort of pledged to each other saying, if we're going to commit this time, we don't want it to just be a little theater club. We were talking about this before. Theater club where people come back and do readings. We want to turn it into a force so that ensemble members who are out there will be dying to come back, because we're trying to build as quickly as they are. So we started to build it, and within that, we started bringing more people into the ensemble, but it was always about, first and foremost, serving the play. So now, 40 years later, there are certain projects that involve lots of founding ensemble members. Most of us are in our 50s, 60s, 70s. And then there are certain projects that are just playwright-centric or musical-centric, where we cast. There are some people that are not members of the company who, like yourself, we've worked with many times, so we sort of have a non-member ensemble as well of people we just love to work with. But we've always tried to retain an ensemble approach to serving the story of the play. And I think the good news about that is it has created an aesthetic that has made many, many great playwrights, directors, and actors want to come back and work with us time and time again.
Right. How did you know that you'd like each other?
When the ensemble?
When you started out, how did you know that you'd like each other? Were there brawls?
Yes. Yeah, I mean, that's the funny thing about it, right? Like families, of course.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the first thing I would say is, because we had a constitution. Dave and Macy, we put together a constitution for ourselves. So whenever we would get into arguments, we would stop and say, hold on a second, what are the principles of the Constitution?
Right.
And what are we supposed to be doing? It's not your opinion versus mine. But yes, we got in plenty of brawls. There were people who left the company because they weren't getting cast enough. There were people, but the principles, the founding principles, I mean, we had a thing, you could see it in the practical handbook for the actor. We had like principles of comportment, which were like, be on time, do your job and your job only. In moments of relaxation, work on your strengths, work on your weaknesses until they can become strengths. There were all these things that were principles that ended up serving us very well in times of stress. So that helped us get along. We didn't always like each other, but I think we've somehow hung together, kind of like a sports team or an army or something, because we had a common purpose.
Well, I think if I could be be so bold to say that the reason that you've been the artistic director for 40 years,
But 32.
32, excuse me,
Yeah.
for 32 years is because your personality is such that you're not a fighter. You are inclusive. You bring people into the tent, and you're a humble person. Anthony, as a director, Neil's a real actor's director. What I mean by that is he's listening to actors. He's not trying to impose his concept on the actors or the play. He's trying to listen to the actors to find out what they're after and what the playwright is after. And I think your success has really been part and parcel of your longevity, and that everybody in this company has come to really respect you for what you do.
Thank you for saying that. It's not, artistic directing, it is a thankless job.
Yeah.
It's fun I feel very, very grateful, which I'm sure you do too, because we both had the chance to work with many of our heroes, people that actors we admired, or continue to work with incredible playwrights and choreographers, whoever it is. So it's a blessing, but yeah, there's a lot of diplomacy involved, and there's a lot of times where the irony, right, when people are when people are very, very invested in what they're doing, their emotions run high, and sometimes for the right reasons. You have to kind of delineate when an artistic fight is worthy, because there are many worthy artistic fights. It's just a matter of navigating it toward the goal, as opposed to letting it destroy the process. I mean, I'll give you an example. We did that play Between Riverside and Crazy, which is an amazing play by Stephen Hadley Girgis and the wonderful Austin Pendleton, who's been around forever. He was in the original production of Fiddler on the Roof, and incredible guy, actor, director. So Austin was directing it, and I got a call during tech that they were sort of yelling at each other and weren't speaking to each other. So I had to go over and kind of go to Austin and be a therapist, talk about what's going on, go to Stephen, and then eventually just bring them back together, because they just had strong feelings about where this particular scene should take place, and trying to kind of figure it. And it went on to be a great, great production. But it wasn't, they were arguing, it wasn't about their egos, it was about what best served the play and the actors.
Right. I want to talk a little bit about the Atlantic Theater Company School, which is, if some of you may know this, is one of just an amazing institution in New York City. New York University has undergraduate, they have any one of, I think, 8 or 9 different
Tisch School of the Arts has a studio system. Yeah.
So the Atlantic Theater Company is one of those schools, and the undergrads can choose which program they want to get into. And the Atlantic Theater Company has grown and become the most important and the most sought-out school in the entire undergraduate Tisch program. And that
It's a subjective opinion, but that is
largely run by his wife, Mary, who is the executive director of the school. So they have this partnership. So Neil is the artistic director of the theater, choosing the plays, choosing the season, while Mary is really running the school, and they both have worked so beautifully together. The synthesis of all of that. But talk about the school. How important is the school to the actual function of the theater?
It's been really important. I think I should also mention the other great, my wife's a wonderful actor, and I have the chance to direct as well. So we have that dynamic in addition to being two people who run the organization. But the school has been with us from the beginning, and I think not only is it a reminder of this process of trying, the evolution of trying to figure out how plays work, how acting works, what it means to work on a scene, going back with younger generations. I'm now 60, and we started it however long ago. But the idea of being reminded every year, going into a room with all these incredible young students in their 20s who are just coming into theater for the first time, and kind of rediscovering through their enthusiasm, through their passion, what it means to tell great stories, what it means to bring the truth of yourself to a piece of material. That's helped us kind of stay, I think, in touch, not become sort of too old and jaded. But it's also just been a nice way for us to continue to think about what makes theater and evolve the technique. That's another interesting thing, is the technique has continued to sort of stretch out. Like we have friends, Jordan's, like Kelly Marr, who comes from the City Theater Company. So we have, within the technique, there are a lot of different teachers coming in and teaching different elements that, again, are sort of broadening our ideas of what it means to be actors or be directors. And lots of amazing students have come out and gone on to incredible careers. Stephanie Shu, and Elizabeth Olsen, all kinds of amazing people. So it's been really gratifying for us.
And you also have the great opportunity to, the actors who are in the company are the teachers at the school, therefore getting employment, employing themselves through the school, so they don't have to go out and wait tables and tend bar and work as limousine drivers. They actually are earning their salaries as teachers in Atlantic, which is a wonderful thing. I'm going to ask you a question about the money because the school brings in certainly a good amount of change.
Yeah.
Is that money, can that money then, I'm talking from a nonprofit, can that money then go to fund some of the production budget for the theater, or is that walled off?
It's not walled off. It's always an interesting question.
Because money is fungible.
As they say. You know, it used to be, I'll tell you, when I came into the position in 1992, the entire budget for the school and theater company was $250,000. And now it's $14 million. So it got much bigger. So the short answer to that question is it used to give over a little bit. But part of the thing is, we didn't wall it off, but we wanted to make sure both elements of the organizations were served. In other words, we wanted to make sure the school had everything that it's needed, so we didn't want to skimp on any of that. And if there was extra money, it would go over to help the productions, and we tried to merge the two organizations so one would serve the other. But yes, it's been very helpful in terms of us sustaining our space, and it uses a lot of the space at the school.
Right.
But we've, of course, as we've gotten bigger, had to rely on a huge amount of foundation support, box office support, fundraisers, galas, all the stuff I'm sure you
Of course, too. Of course. So here's another question, and I want to get back to the question I started about moving plays to Broadway.
Yeah.
You've been lucky, or I would say lucky, it's really skill, but I remember when the Beauty Queen of Linen came at the Atlantic Theater Company, and the big move that year was you moving that play to Broadway.
Yeah.
How does that happen? Is it the big New York Times review, and then do people come on board, or what are the mechanics of that? Explain to us if you would.
Good question. I think, one, it definitely starts with the quality of the play. Is the play good? Is the play going great? So, is there a certain electricity with it when it's off Broadway? What else? Yes, a New York Times review can certainly help, but the mechanics now, there's these things called enhancement deals. And what an enhancement deal is if a Broadway producer who's interested in bringing either new plays or new musicals to Broadway, they want to develop. In the old days, in the 50s, before not-for-profit theater, they would take a show out of town, they would tour it around, and that's where they would.
To Great Barrington.
Yeah, exactly. All over, all these playhouses.
New Haven and Boston.
Yeah. So then not-for-profits came along, and it started to. They were still sort of out of town tryouts, but then things started happening in the late 60s and 70s, like Hair and Chorus Line, which were both started at the Public Theater. And so there were not-for-profits in New York City that started to do really outstanding work that was pushing the envelope, bringing rock and roll and other contemporary music in. So people started to sort of sniff around, maybe there's Broadway material coming from these places. Then as everything got more and more expensive, commercial producers were going, can we somehow help each other. You know, that we're, as a not-for-profit, maybe interested in doing musicals, but musicals cost 2 or 3 times what a play costs. So the last couple of musicals we've done off-Broadway cost between $2 and $2.5 million. Which is
to mount them off Broadway?
Off-Broadway.
Right.
Yeah, that's
that
the,
goes up when
yeah,
you go to Broadway.
and when you go to Broadway, they're usually $10 to $20 million, something like that. You know, some of them are
You're talking about the band's visit? Or
band's visit, yeah. So what happened was, because in America there's not, well, yeah, in America there's not tons of funding for all these musicals. So we're sort of trying to figure out, if we want to do musicals or large-scale plays, how do we do it? So some of the more creative commercial producers said, hey, if you guys are interested in doing this, we will give you, it's called an enhancement deal, we'll give you a certain amount of money, maybe half the budget or whatever it is. And
you to the nonprofit?
yeah, to the nonprofit. And there's with the 501c3 and the IRS, they're allowed to do what's called an enhancement deal, where they're giving money to us, and all they get is the right to lift it. If it does well, they have the right to move it to Broadway. So with many, the first time we did it was with Beauty Queen of Lebanon, because we had to bring all these it was the first Martin McDonagh play that had ever been done in America, and he really wanted the original cast from Ireland. Gary Hines from the Druid Theatre directed it, and wonderful actors, Marie Mullen and Brina Byrne, and it had, so we were flying people in and housing them. It was very expensive for us. We were pretty small at that time. So we got together some commercial producers uptown, and they gave us, I don't know, I think at that time it might have been $250 grand, and maybe it cost us $800 grand to do it. So that helped us. Then it was a huge success, and they moved it.
And then do you, the Atlantic Theatre Company, participate in that Broadway production?
Yes, we get what they
Share.
a little portion of the gross weekly box office, and then if it recoups, you get net. It's like 1.5 going to 2 weekly. All this, you know, there's 3 things that matter in an enhancement deal. 1 is billing when you get to Broadway. 2 is the gross participation, and 3 are the net.
Yeah.
Right. And then you get a piece of if it tours.
Yeah, right.
Like Spring Awakening was great for that. Ended up not only being successful in New York, but it toured all over the place.
Yeah.
It went all over the world and ended up bringing lots of money back to help fund future things. So,
Excellent.
I mean, the classic example is the chorus line, which helped fund the public for many years.
Right, of course, yes, exactly. 42nd Street, I think, as well, also
And,
started.
Hamilton.
And of course, Hamilton, yeah. What would just of the Broadway shows that you have produced, is there one story that you could tell us that was maybe it was going to go but it didn't go, but someone came in with some money, or are there any?
Well, I think the best Spring Awakening is a good example because it had been kicking around for a while, and if you know the play, it's kind of a famous play. We all wanted to do it in high school because it was banned for 60 years because it's getting, coming of age, all these teenagers having sex on stage, and and masturbation. It's like all the things you want in high school. But it was also a pretty wild, it's this Vatican play. It was written in the 1860s or something.
Right.
But it was also surreal. I mean, the original production has Peter Lorre. I think he plays the narrator. And it's he's headless. He carries his head around. And so we were looking at it. They made it into a musical. Stephen Sater, who had been an off-Broadway playwright, wrote the book Duck and Sheep, who was then a contemporary singer-songwriter. And our friends Michael Mayer and the actor Tom Hulse, who was becoming a director and a producer, they had done it out at Sundance, sort of workshopping it. And they were peddling it around New York, but nobody wanted to do it. They said it's too dark, and it was too depressing, and there's a suicide in it. So we heard it, and we listened to the music, and we thought, look, and the book needed some work, even if they don't fix the book, we thought the music is better than 75% of the stuff that we're seeing around New York. So my way of judging whether I should do a play is, can I turn to my friends and say, yes, you should buy a ticket see this. And I thought, yeah, I would say to all my friends, yeah, you should just buy a ticket to hear the music, even if we don't fix the book. And we did fix the book. So that was a fascinating example of something, that and the Lieutenant of Inishmore, which was another Martin Luther play. Nobody wanted to touch it. It was so violent, but it was really funny.
Yeah.
So
We saw the stages all
yeah,
over.
there was like bodies being chopped
Buckets
up
of blood.
cats exploding. It was ridiculous, but it ended up doing great. So those were two shows where we thought we were both terrified of them and thought, oh my God, if this works, it will be great. So nobody else really wanted to do them. We were the last people left standing, and they both. And the same with the Band's Visit. Band's Visit is such a, fragile, subtle to piece. It doesn't serve anything up that people were like, you're crazy. That's not good. That's not a Broadway.
Middle Eastern music and
Yeah,
the
yeah.
costumes, but it was.
But interestingly, the first director on that was Hal Prince. And so Hal Prince, when he was in his 80s, he ended up, for a lot of reasons, because he had too many other shows, relinquishing it up and having David Cromer do it. But what a fascinating piece. We were just led by, are we excited about it here?
Right. What is the next thing that you're working on, or that is in your sights, or is in your back pocket, or something that's down the line that you're looking at for Broadway, or for a production in the Atlantic that you think might even have some legs?
The thing that we just put on this show in New York, based on the Buena Vista Social Club, the album. And we had been working on that for 5 years. And it was our partner was the same partner we had on the Band's Visit, a guy named Orrin Wolf. And so Orrin, about 5 or 6 years, said, do you like that album? Because I'm going to option it too. I said, I love that album. So we took a couple of trips to Cuba. And then we started working, this wonderful playwright, Marco Ramirez, who wrote a play called The Royale that was at Lincoln Center, who's Cuban-American, started working on the book. And it took a long time. It was because the key for that project was we knew it had to be authentic. We knew it had to have musicianship that was real. So we had one actor from Mexico City, a number of Cuban musicians who came via other countries, one Cuban actor, musician who lives in Barcelona, we brought him over, another woman from Mexico City, or Mexico, outside of Mexico City, and then people from, it was an incredible group. So that was a huge success for us this fall, and we'll probably move to Broadway the coming fall. And then we'll see. I mean, we've had a bunch of this great, beautiful play that Jim mentioned called English by Sanaz Tusi, who's a Middle Eastern writer. And
We get played up here at Barrington
Yeah.
Stage.
yeah,
And
that was
some
so.
of you might have seen it.
We do these play festivals every season called Mix Fest, and we usually pick a different sort of cultural background. Like there's been Latinx Mix Fest, and we did a Middle Eastern Mix Fest. And Sanaz was still at NYU in school, and some of the curators that we co-produced with said there's this incredible writer who's still in school. She did a one-act, and we met her there and said, what else do you have? And she had English, and before we were able to put an offer, the Roundabout put an offer in for their little theater. Then and we were like, oh, we can get it. Weirdly, because we're friends with the Roundabout people, when COVID hit, they had to shut down that theater. So they said, we don't have a theater, do you want to co-produce it? So we ended up producing it at the Atlantic in our the theater was bigger than the original theater. They wanted to. That went well, and that's now moving uptown, which is really exciting. Yeah.
Wow,
So,
that's exciting.
and she's, she's incredible, an incredible voice, but young too. I
Young.
think she may be one of the youngest people who's ever won.
Really? You have a lot of playwrights in this group tonight. I see 6, 8, and raise your hand if you're playwrights or.
Wow. Awesome.
Some on their way up, some like Mark St. Germain has already been producing at a very high level of writing. These are all Mike Brady wrote to Jillian on her 37th birthday. But some terrific play. We have a playwriting group called Virtue Voices. And many of the people are here. Talk about, if you could, to them and to us, about the commissioning program and your development program in Atlantic. How do you recognize talent? How do you look, where do you look for talent and scripts?
Yeah, I mean, we sort of look everywhere. I mean, look, I'm not gonna lie, as most of you know, the past 3 or 4 years has been difficult. I mean, there's been a contraction in the American theater. As you probably noticed, lots of New York theaters and lots of theaters around the country are producing 2 or 3 less plays, in some cases more, because of the contraction. Some of it had to do with COVID, some of it had to do with audiences sort of drying up, and some of it had to do with trying to pay people more. So it was a sort of perfect storm of a contraction and lots of people, for many of the right reasons, saying you have to pay interns, you have to do all, you have to pay your artists more. So the reason I say that is we're sort of trying desperately to continue lots. We do quite a bit of commission. We have a launch commission program for writers that are just starting out. We have a larger commissioning program, which used to be larger than it is, but we're kind of building it back now post-COVID. We do.
Are those year-long commissions, or how do they
work? You know, the way the commissions work, I never like to put, you can't put a schedule on. If you like the writer, you sort of go,
You're investing in the writer.
Yeah, you say, what do you want to write? I'm not a big fan of telling them what to write. Some people might want to, but if you have a good idea, here's some money, and if you can get us a play, great. But some people have commissions that were 5 years old, we're still waiting, but you do the best you can, but I feel like it's really about encouraging artists as opposed to, hard deadlines. We have reading series, we have that Mixed Fest Festival, and like I said, we've been trying to widen and diversify. We sort of call it inclusive excellence in terms of that. But we try to do as much as we can. It's gotten harder and harder, I love it. I love coming up here because I spent early summers at Williamstown. I used to come around, but it was such a hotbed of new play activity coming to all these festivals up here, and I hope that we can get back to that, because I just, most people are in the theater because they love stories and they just love doing it. And it turned into this thing where, in some cases, right, yeah, we need to be paid more, but most of us were just like, we'll do it however we're going to do it. We just want to have lots of shows, and there was something that was so exciting about that. So my hope, to answer your question, is to be commissioning a lot more and to be doing lots more producing, even if it's just workshops, to keep things process-wise going.
You have a lot of relationships with very special playwrights, and I think, of course, David Mann, Howard Porter, Jez Butterworth, who we had a few beers with on a few occasions, David Lindsay-Bear, Martin McDonough, Stephen Adley Girgis, Rajiv Joseph, Simon Stevens, Ethan Cohen, the list goes on and on.
Andy Baker.
Andy Baker, of course. How do you cultivate these relationships with writers? How do you keep those relationships alive? Is that on you? Or is that your literary department? Or how does that work?
Part of it is on me, but part of it is it's like I was saying before, if somebody comes and works for you and they love it, they usually want to come back. So hopefully you're creating a place that is striving, challenging people for, driving them to artistic excellence, but also creating a place that's about process, that's nurturing, that's protecting the work, that isn't a lot of producers saying, God, it's got to be sexier, it's got to make money, but you're really saying, we value what you're trying, your voice, what you're trying to say as a writer, and we're going to protect that. So it's the culture of the organization, hopefully, and then it's staying in touch, and it's also, I don't know, some of it is subjective, some of it is sniffing around and what writers you like or you
respond to.
Yeah, but I also don't, I'm a big believer in process. So, there were times when the sort of artistic team would come and say, oh, I hated that play, or I love that play, and I said, I don't think that attitude is useful, because it's sort of like a relationship. Oh, you're perfect, we lived happily ever after, or I hate. That's not how relationships work, it's a process thing. So I said, don't tell me if you hated it or loved it. Look at the writer, look at the writing as their potential.
Is the truth of the voice there? Is there great dialogue? Because it's not about is it a hit or is it a flop, it's really about nurturing somebody's voice. And I think once they know that they can trust that you're not simply going, it has to be perfect or it sucks, then they start going, oh, this is great because I'm allowed to fail. And that, just like an actor, you want to create an arena where they're willing to go out. It's like sports, right? You do your best game, and sometimes you don't win, but you have a good time playing.
The next.
Yeah, they're doing good.
Yeah, they are doing good. Yeah, they got, what's his name, the Gazingas, come on, Porzingis. So you'll be pleased to know that of our group, many of the writers in the Berkshire Voices are here tonight, and we as a theater company have decided to produce a play, give it a full production as part of our season.
Great.
That is coming out of our Berkshire Voices, and we'll pick that play, and we'll know that play within a month or so. But we're very excited about all the terrific writers that are in the group that is housed under the auspices of Great Barrington Public Theater. I had just a couple more questions for you, Neil, but there's a question that I really want to ask you was, did you ever feel that you were failing? I ask that question because I feel that every morning. running a theater company, or you've had great success over the years in the Atlantic, but I would imagine there's some times when you just feel like it's all going to shit.
No, I feel I feel the same way. It's almost every morning. And I'm being serious. There's obviously times where you're like, wow, that did really well, or we have enough money in the bank to survive. But no matter where you turn, somebody's mad at you. Yeah. Because the hardest thing about running a theater is there's only one answer, which is yes. And for those of the playwrights in the group, I mean, it's really hard, right? Because there's one answer, which is yes, I'll do your play. And the other answer is like, okay, we'll do the reading or whatever, which is very, very difficult. So within that, yes, you feel a lot of shame, guilt, all of that.
That's just the marriage.
But it's, but you start to I used to panic about everything and literally, lose weight and stuff because I was just scared. I tend to be terrified most of the time. But what I realized too is I started to be led by fear. And what I mean by that is there's times when you get a great play and you go, wow, I don't know if you can say that on stage. I don't know if you would be like that's so truthful. Like, can you really say it? And 9 times out of 10, those are the plays that we end up doing where you're like, whoa, can we do that? Or is that possible? So sometimes when you're really scared, you have to kind of pay attention if it's the right kind of fear, or are we getting too comfortable? But it is scary, and of course it's scary to be an actor. It's scary to go out in front of 1,000 people 8 times a week. So you start kind of embracing this idea of terror as part of what you do.
Just a little off topic, I read an article in the New York Times about Carol Rothman and Second Stage, 8th Avenue and 43rd Street losing their theater. And due to what she says in the article, it's really due to the skyrocketing rent in that block. How do you, with your theater on 30th Street and then your Second Stage on 16th Street and your office complex, with the skyrocketing rents in New York, how do you keep it together? And are the market forces in New York turning theater upside down?
Yes, they are, definitely. I mean, it's a very scary time, like with Second Stage losing its space, Signature's having lots of trouble in terms of affording the space. I mean, you look around, most theaters our size in New York, the public laid off 15%, 20% of their staff. We furloughed a bunch of people. So it's very, very tricky right now. We've been where our offices and our school are, we moved into, it's in Chelsea. It used to be called the Port Authority building. It was the sort of building from the 20s or 30s that they built for the ships coming in. Google bought that building in 2014. So it wasn't our choice. Google became our landlord, which we found during COVID was a real plus. Because all the employees left, and Google said, don't worry about it, we'll charge you like just a fragment of the rent because we know you're not for profit. So we got a ton of help from Google, thank God. And then we were able to have some, in the past 2 years, some really successful shows. Days of Wine and Roses did very well. The Move Uptown, that Sarasota show, that Bedwetter did very well. So a lot of shows, Annie Baker's play that we just did, Infinite Life, sold out.
Right.
So with the box office and foundation help, and of course, did you get PPP money? Yeah, the COVID money.
Do you own the space on
No.
30th Street, the church?
On 20th Street.
On 20th Street, I'm sorry.
We lease, we have a long-term lease. The Episcopal Church won't sell it to us, but they'll give us a long, I think we have about 15 years on that lease. And we rent, so we have a 200-seat theater and a 99-seat theater on 16th Street. We rent both of them and we lease from Google, right? Some other theaters, like New York Theater Workshop owns their space, Playwrights Horizons owns their space.
Yeah, right. Well, no, it's terrible, what's going on with New York City. But I was very heartened to hear your story and see what's going on there. And but when you read that story, like Carol in the Second Stage was founded really to give plays a second chance.
Yeah.
Place that had a first production that may not have been as successful. It was really founded to give plays that second production where you can kind of revitalize it and reimagine the play. And that's very, 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 very important.
What's an interesting thing, again, slightly off topic, but over the years, a bunch of English friends of mine said, why is it that in New York, or even in America, in England, because they have a lot more funding, there's a turnover of artistic directors more often. The artistic directors will turn over every 7 to 10 years. And most of those theaters are funded through the British Lottery. And they kept asking, why is it that in New York that's less the case? And I thought about that for a long time, and I think it has to do with funding, partly. Because if you look at most of the theaters, I thought about this when we were talking, so Carol Rothman founded that theater. Joe Papp, who ran that theater, the public for many years, founded that theater. Lynn Meadow, who started MTC, founded that theater. Todd Haynes basically took the Roundabout, which was a tiny theater, and made it into something, so was sort of a founder. Doug Abel, who runs the Vineyard, also kind of a founder. Jim Nicola, who was New York Theater Workshop, also. So what you have are these people who shouldered the organization. And you think of artistic directing as like picking the place. It's keeping the institution alive through fundraising, through going out. So it's a different. There's great things about the system in America versus Europe and Britain, but there's also things that it takes a long time to build relationships for funding, as I'm sure you experience up here.
Right. But as you know, in the nonprofit world, it's really about fundraising. I'm sure you spend a great deal of your day fundraising and board development and finding the right leaders who are going to help your organization, your board, and our donors as well. I want to open up we're at that kind of part where I want to open up some questions for some of you who might have a question for Neil. Anybody? Lee, do you have a question?
I do. Would you ever consider like a reverse group theater kind of summer where you came up to a place like this, like where Great Barrington Public gives you a new play and look for co-producers, look for a new play and take it to New York?
So Lee's question, for those who didn't hear it, is would Neil ever consider coming up to the Berkshires to co-produce with like maybe Great Barrington Public Theater a production that maybe end up in New York? Is that
Yes,
your
and
question?
have a beautiful summer in the Berkshires.
And have a beautiful
Yes.
summer. And barbecues. That's right.
Jim and I,
Basketball.
Jim's already been talking about that. I mean, the thing to tell you, so for many, many, many years, we were sort of the reverse. We spent, I think it was almost 16 or 17 summers in Vermont So we used to do in both, we started in Montpelier, very near to where Macy and Mehmet had houses, in 87, 88, and 89, and then starting in 89 or 90, we went to Burlington City Hall. So that was when we would produce sometimes we would produce 6 or 8 plays in the summertime. And then we'd come back to New York and do 1 play. And then it started reversing, where we were doing full seasons in New York and we could only afford to do smaller plays. So we did do that, and I think we would love to it was easier when we were younger. Because of different people now. Right, but we'd love to go back. It's really a question of sort of labor and time, but look, I love that idea. I mean, I grew up in Vermont and I loved being, just theater getting back, getting out of New York. So I'm hoping that it can happen, because I just think, again, like I said, I think it's so great what Jim and you all are doing up here, and I feel like there's such a tradition between all the stuff that's happened around here and the stuff that happened in Williamstown, places like New York Stage and Film and other things that used to happen in Vermont, that I just feel I would not only love to, but I hope that it can, because summer is such a great time for process.
Yes.
And for people to get out of the city and
Get
try
out.
stuff. And I also, the other thing I want to say about, something great about individuals in America is that there has been a tradition of believing in artists, and sort of those who have the resources being philanthropic and civic-minded enough to invest in artists and allow them to take risks. And I value that, and I hope that will stay around, because it is, you can't always do that. That's why I don't necessarily like getting big federal money or big state money, because there can be constrictions on it. But sometimes your friends are like, we like what you do, here's some money, and then you can allow the artists to sort of do what they want. But yes, love to come.
Yeah. Okay, we'll hold you to that. Michelle, go ahead.
I have a question about, when you were talking about Spring Awakening, for example, the story you told us, the score was really great, and you thought even if someone bought a ticket just for the score, it was worth it, the book needed work, and then you were able to fix the book. Can you talk a little bit about what the process was for fixing the book? What sort of developmental process, and who at your company is in charge of that? Is that it's not your job, is it the literary department, is it the dramaturg department, is it who is fixing the book?
Yeah, so
fixing the show,
Right.
who fixes the show.
the process, and I think it's a good question. It's not a set question. With something, musicals are complicated. They're sort of call them like the 5-headed monster, because there's the book writer, there's the composer, there's the director, there's the choreographer, there's the music director, and you sort of go out from there. So the process of developing a musical usually takes, I'd say at minimum 5 to 6 years, and that process can be, okay, so you have the Band's Visit is a good example. They came to us and said, have you seen the Band's Visit movie? And I said, no, I watched the movie. We're like, wow, this is incredible. They said, we're adapting the screenplay, and we have 2 songs. So we did this is when Hal Prince was up, we did an initial reading, Tony Shalhoub and a bunch of other people. We just got into a room, and we heard Itamar Moses' adaptation, which was very spare, and David Yazbek had 2 songs he recorded. So we listened to the songs, and then we did a meeting with the director and me as sort of one of the producers, and Oren and a couple of other people, and Al Prince, the director, and some dramaturgs, who work on our staff, and lit people. And then you say, okay, you have some assignments, they go off and keep writing for another 3 months. Let's get back into a room.
So they get a set of notes.
Yeah, they get notes, and sometimes you do equity allows you to do it. There's a 29-hour workshop, which is there's a 2-week workshop. Sometimes we'll do, on Buena Vista, we probably did 2 3-week-long workshops, and maybe 3 or 4 29-hour workshops. So it takes a while, but that's musicals. Plays are less so. Plays, sometimes you'll do a reading, give some notes, but they kind of speak for themselves, I think. It's a long and involved process, which is why you need help funding it. But a lot of it is about kind of nurturing, cheering people on, and making sure they stay on task.
Thank you. Another question, this gentleman right here?
So, the cliche, of course, is theater, Broadway, anything can happen. Two of the productions that you did on Broadway, you had to really juggle
Yeah.
some specific variables. Of course, American Buffalo with trying to keep, I don't know if it was all fell on your shoulders, but to keep that cast, that production alive for a couple of years. And then with Speed the Plow with losing.
Yeah, Mercury.
Yeah, I was gonna say, but
Jeremy
you did.
Piven.
Yeah.
Mercury.
So I was wondering if you could speak to those experiences.
Yes, so this is me so those were two shows that were not at the Atlantic, they went right to Broadway. I directed them both on Broadway. So American Buffalo was an interesting process because, again, it was sort of star-driven, and a lot of shows on Broadway, in order to get funded, they're like, we'll do the show, but we need at least one, whatever, it's subjective, who they consider to be bankable stars and who's not. But in the case of that, I had known Sam Rockwell for a long time, and obviously I'd known Mamet for a long time. And Sam had said he really wanted to do the part of Teach. And so then they called Jeffrey Richards, this producer's worked with Mamet a lot. They called me and said, would you be interested? I said, yeah. And they said, we're trying to put together the cast. And they had heard that Lawrence Fishburne may be interested. So then I flew out to Los Angeles, and Mamet and I went to meet with Fishburne. And I had also known this because I knew he was a fan of the play. He also, you may know this, he wrote a play called Riff Raff in the 90s, which Fishburne himself wrote it and acted in it with, he was in it, the rapper, who's no longer with us, Eddie D, was in it, and one other guy, I can't remember who the other actor was, but it was loosely based on American Buffalo, so I knew he liked the play. And Mamet and I had a really good meeting with Lawrence, and so he signed on, and then we got Darren Criss to sign on, which was great, and then we went into rehearsals for 4 weeks. Lena knows this because she came to a run-through. Literally, we were supposed to go into tech the weekend that COVID shut everything down. So the set was built encircling the square. Everything got shut down. We stopped for 2 years. We continued to rehearse a little bit on Zoom, which was really fun. And then we weren't sure if it was going to happen again. But they re-upped it. We went back into rehearsal for another 4 weeks. And the thing that was extraordinary about that was to have rehearsed a play and then allow it to sort of marinate for 2 years and then come back in.
Yeah.
That I felt like it just got deeper and deeper. I also had the good fortune of having directed William H. Macy and Philip Baker Hall in a production at Atlantic in 2000, so I had enough experience with the play. But that was one. The other experience with Speed the Plow was wild just because we had a great time, but Jeremy Piven...
I was in your office with the shit game.
Yes, as we got further into it, I think Jeremy was just getting tired of doing the show, but he started talking about, I might have mercury poisoning, and we weren't sure what was going on. But then it turned into this whole thing, and he ended up...
He wanted to get out. He wanted to, if you don't mind me telling
Go ahead.
Jeremy Piven was in the lead in Speed the Plow. He wanted to get out of production, and so we told the producers.
Well, but I should say, before you say, this production was really successful. It
Huge.
got great reviews, but I think he realized that in terms of award nominations, they were probably going to go more towards Raoul's.
Oh, right. Well, so he said to the producers, I've been eating so much sushi that I've gotten mercury poisoning. And so they reached the playwright the following day, David Mamet, and he said, well, I want to congratulate Jeremy on his new career as a thermometer. But I was with him.
Yeah, so that was, but the sort of glass half full of that adventure was that we ended up having 3 different casts. So our friend Jordan Leish, who's part of the Atlantic, who understudied Jeremy, he came in for a week or 10 days. Norbert Leo Butz agreed to come in for 3 weeks. And then William H. Macy came in for 6 weeks. And the New York Times, it was rare that they would do something like this, but they kindly then Brendan wanted to review all of them. So he reviewed all of them, and really, really, really positively. So he liked the whole process, but it was crazy, because and it was over Christmas. So we're doing all this. I was jumping up on stage saying, Norbert would be on book for one act and off book for the next act. But it was, the fun is when, you're obviously terrified and all that, but then you go, all right, we're just going to do it. It's live theater. It's exciting. So yeah, it's a process.
We have time really for one more question. This woman over here, yes.
Yeah.
What difference have you seen working with young people in this 30-year span? Because obviously you go from no electronics to a whole virtual world, and
Right.
how's that impacted?
The question is, what is the difference between working with young people over the past 30 years?
Yeah.
How has that changed?
Yeah, and I think part of your question was also about technology, too. I think the first part of that question, like any of us, as we start to get old, we're sort of like, oh wait, why are you doing it that way? We don't do things, I'm old, I don't like the way you're doing that, all right, that's too loud. That you all of a sudden realize you've become that older person. When you were a teenager, you didn't want that person to be around. So there's a part of it where you and that's going back to Jim's point about school, where being in class with students, you're like, you sort of have to check yourself. You're like, stop being the old guy and open your eyes and ears to somebody's voice and what they're trying to say. Now, granted, as we all know, in the past 3 years, there's been a lot of people shouting about a lot of things. And so trying to discern what's positive change versus what's narcissism, somebody just trying to get attention, which is sometimes hard to discern. But so I think that, I find it really exciting. Actually, just the other day, so a lot of the times when we're trying to find, good young writers, we go to other great playwrights. And there's a young woman who studies with Annie Baker at University of Texas, who I think is a good writer. I haven't read the play yet, but my associate artistic director read the play. And it's about 16-year-olds. The reason I say it sounds like a very, very cool play, and she's still in school. But with many of the great young writers we've found, it has come through other playwrights. But I also want to get to the second part of your question, which is technology. Because our theater has always been like, really interested in purism in terms of not using lots of technology. We really don't like using mics. We'll use them for musicals. But, and we like, Mamet was very into just, everything live. So trying to deal with technology where it still serves the story is a question. But we did, recently we did a play called The Simulacrum with Lucas Nath, where he was working with an amazing sleight of hand musician, a magician called Steve Schiffo. And we had a relationship with Ricky Jay, who was a sleight of hand guy. So Steve did a lot of stuff where there was a recorded voice. Lucas was recorded and Steve was responding. It dealt a lot with technology in a very cool way. And Lucas's wife, Mona Pierno, is currently doing a show, I Love You So Much I Could Die, in your theater workshop, where it's a lot of technology. Her back is to the audience. It's been quite controversial. It's a beautiful show. But so I guess the short answer is trying to embrace the changes of technology in a way that you feel is still serving the truth of the writer without becoming solely about the tech, if that makes sense.
And then in and of itself.
Yes, exactly. But I think it's just like when rock and roll came along. It's exciting, but some people can't deal with it. So trying to deal with technology in an art form that's so much based for 3,000 years on the live human experience is not sacrificing that. But there's cool things, even with sound, sound designs have become really, really subtle and interesting recently, what people can do.
So I want to give Neil something that I know you're gonna love Neil. You're gonna wear all over New York City. Perfect, okay, we might have something for Alina. But we're so appreciative of this guy, you know, who was at the top of his game in New York, coming up to talk to us for tonight about theater and the trends in theater, what is happening at the Atlantic, how they move shows to Broadway, what's going on at the Atlantic School, all the powerhouse that they have done over these past 30 years. It's amazing to watch. I've been a part of it for a lot of it, and just so appreciative. So we would like to invite all of you for a little bit of cheese and wine and cheese in the East Room to rub shoulders with us for a little bit. And we want to just thank Neil for coming tonight.
I want to say before we go, I just want to say I've known and admired Jim for many years. As Jim said, he we first met at this Vietnam Veterans Benefit, but he's run extraordinary theater companies. It's amazing the work you're doing up here. I applaud all of you for doing it, and I'm really, like I said, it's a weird time for theater right now, but it's heartening to come up and to see you all still in support of theater, and I'm a big believer in live theater. I mean, whenever you go to the Acropolis and you look over and you're like, oh, what's there? There's a theater, and you think, yeah, they were doing it back then, 35 years ago, or whatever. Why can't we keep doing it? It's really exciting.
The thing that excites me, is always excited me about not only the Atlantic Theater Company, but what we do here is having the playwright in the room to work on the script during the course of rehearsal. We're doing new plays. We're not doing revivals of plays. We're doing plays that are premieres, and actors love that because it makes our socks go up and down. Mark and all of you playwrights, to be able to work with you on brand new theater. We're creating the new stories for tomorrow. So thank you, Neil, Pepe.